Hello friends, welcome back. I am Rajneesh, and today in this session we are going to understand how to migrate an existing infrastructure from 389 directory server to IPA, Identity Policy and Accounting. In the last session we have already understood how to install an IPA server, what is an IPA server, and what basically are the additional features that it provides. So basically it provides you a very good user interface so that it can even be handled by a novice user. And secondly, uh, user management becomes easy. You can manage sudoers centrally with a very good user interface. It provides you Kerberos based authentication. Users can definitely be managed even from the same GUI, machine based authentication. So it's really a great tool, and the users or the corporate users would like to move from any existing directory server to IPA server. So this session is going to be about how to migrate from 389 directory server to IPA server. The set of instructions are such that even you can use the same set of instructions to migrate from OpenLDAP server to IPA server. Okay, so what exactly is going to be the process when we are migrating from 389 directory server to IPA? First thing is you should have IPA server already installed. Second part is you set the IPA into migration mode. Thirdly, you tell the IPA server that yes, start migrating. So start migrating, what exactly it does is it does a LDAP search query to the 389 directory server, fetches out the users on the basis of the object class, fetches out the groups on the basis of object class POSIX group, and just fills them up into the IPA LDAP server. So it's generally use LDAP queries, LDAP search kind of queries to fetch out the users and the groups. Groups can be fetched out on the basis of object class. It could be POSIX group or something else. It supports both schemas, which is RF2307 and 2307 BIS. It simply means the difference is that the way the groups are stored and the way the members of the groups are defined. If you are talking about 2307, the members of the group are identified by the object member UID. Here in 2307 BIS, members of the group are identified by unique member attribute. So for IPA to understand the users that belong to a particular group, he needs to know where the users are or which is the attribute corresponding to that group, corresponding to that an attribute which defines the users of a particular group. So we can use any of these schemas, and it can be specified at the time when we are migrating the users. So we set the IPA into migration mode, import users and groups, and then one thing to be noted is IPA can create or fills the LDAP directory server, 389 directory server inside it with the users with the same password that were present previously on LDAP server, OpenLDAP 389 directory server, but the passwords as they were stored in hashed format, it's not able to generate Kerberos key for that. So Kerberos password is not generated for that. To generate that in the migration mode, IPA provides a web page which is /IPA/migration that can be used by the effective users to get their Kerberos credentials created. Okay. So finally, when all the users in the corporate are migrated, means they have generated their Kerberos credentials, we can switch off the migration mode and start the users or the servers enrolling into it and authenticate the users against IPA server. So let's start with the lab. Coming on to the terminal, so we have three machines involved in it. One is infra server, on which 389 directory server is already present. The second is IPA server, and the third one is test VM. Test VM is going to work as a client. Right now it's authenticating against LDAP. After the migration, it is going to authenticate against IPA. IPA is a server that is already configured for identity policy and accounting, and infra is the server to which the test VM is presently authenticating against. To confirm that, just run the command authconfig TUI, and here you can see that it's authenticating against LDAP. Use LDAP authentication, and which is the LDAP server? It's infra.labs.local. Fine. Move back. Let's see some of the LDAP users. Here you can see LDAP RCval, LDAP1, LDAP2 and LDAP3, and in the same way you can see some groups. Sorry, here you can see that these are the groups. Fine. So the objective is to migrate this test machine from LDAP or 389 directory server authentication to IPA authentication server. So first thing that we need to do is let's log in into the GUI of IPA. Okay, so here is the GUI, and if you have a look into the list of users, it's having only one user, which is admin. Let's have a look into the groups. There are only three groups: admin, editors and IPA users. So LDAP accounts are not yet there. LDAP 1, LDAP 2 and 3, they are not there. So just minimize it, and let's see the process to migrate them. If you need to know the help, just type the command IPA and it will show you what all it can do to get the help of the next session. So our objective is to get the help about migration. So IPA migration, here it will display you the steps that you can use to migrate from any LDAP based directory server to IPA. So the first thing that needs to be done is set the IPA server into migration mode so that the users can be migrated. To set that, IPA config mode -- enable migration equal to true. Fine. So here you can see it's right now in the migration mode, and by default the domain will be labs.local for email, and here are the other attributes that you can see. Basically the home directory will be present inside home. You can modify them if you want. Default shell is going to be bin bash, a bin sh. You can modify that if you want. So let's start with the migration process now. First, it's set in the migration mode. Second thing is, here you can see the migrate ds command. Let's copy this command. Okay, first thing is we have to fetch the details from infra server. Is it able to resolve infra server? Yes, it should be. In case it's not able to resolve, you can place an entry inside etc host or inside your DNS server that resolves it. So resolution is fine. IPA migrate ds. First thing is we need to know where the entries are present inside. So which is the base DN in which the entries are present. Coming on to the directory, here you can see the base DN that we have is all the entries are present inside DC equal to labs, comma DC equal to local. So base DN equal to DC equal to labs, comma DC equal to local. Okay, so second part is how to fetch the users from minus minus user container equal to OU equal to people. You may have it as a different container if we are talking about OpenLDAP or any other directory server, but we can specify it over here. How to make sure which is the container corresponding to it. People are present inside it and they are under OU equal to people. We are excluding DC equal to labs comma DC equal to local because we have already specified it as a base DN. It could be different than labs.local, so that's the reason we specified it. Here in our scenario it's same, but in your scenario it could be labs.com or xyz, so you can even fetch the details of the users that is presently having different base DN. So user container is specified, then minus minus group container OU equal to group. How do we make sure? Just click on group. Actually it's OU equal to groups. Fine. So now how to identify which groups do we have to fetch from it? So it could be group object class equal to, we are going to fetch only the users of POSIX group object class, so only Linux groups from it. Now it knows the base DN, it knows where to find the people or users, where to find the groups from, and how to identify a group. So we are done with all the part. The final thing is how to connect to this 389 directory server to fetch the users. So it is going to be bind dn equal to cn equal to directory manager. In your scenario it could be different, or even you can create an ACI that has read-only access to OU equal to people and group that should be able to fetch the details of the users. And finally there are two things that we need to specify. One is it has got a compatibility feature which provides support to the clients that make use of schema, which is RFC 2307 and 2307 BIS. So by default it provides support for that, but that has some additional overhead. So at the time of migration you can disable them, but I would suggest not to disable. So with compatibility feature and okay, minus minus schema that we are importing the users from. If we are talking about 389 directory server schema or OpenLDAP schema that we use for a group, I generally make use of 2307. So it's going to be RFC 2307. Why? Because my users in the group are identified by the attribute member UI, member UID. Okay, finally LDAP infra.labs.local. Let me just copy it because I missed one thing. Copy, Control C. Okay, Using these credentials, it can interact with the directory server to fetch the details. Now, what about the second part? How does it populates these details into IPA server? For that, he needs to have the access to update the LDAP server inside IPA. So that will actually happen making use of the credentials of admin user. So I use kinit admin, and now I have a ticket granting ticket for user admin. Now I'll fetch the user details using these credentials and will populate them into the IPA's internal LDAP server using the admin user. So now I just copy it and paste it. Now it is asking me for the password. So which is this password? This is the password that it is going to make use to connect to 389 directory server or infra server to fetch the users and the groups. This is corresponding to the bind dn, which is cn equal to directory manager. So manager at 123. So here you can see that migrate ds is now completed, and it has migrated the users rcval, LDAP 123, and these are the groups that are migrated. Failed users, it was not able to migrate these users because they do not have POSIX account attribute corresponding to it. The same happens with the, yeah, if you are talking about group, there is no such group, that was ignored. Now it provides you one thing: passwords have been migrated in pre-hashed format in the IPA's internal LDAP server, but the Kerberos keys are not yet generated. Reason being, they can be generated if you provided the plain text password, which was not fetched from the directory server because it's saved in hashed format. So how do we create, or how do we ask the users to create the Kerberos keys for them? In case we have thousands of users, we should just point them out to the URL location, which is IPA/migration, so that they can migrate their accounts. Okay, I'll show you one thing. IPA user show rcval LDAP1. Here you can see the details of the user. Account disabled, false, password is true. But if you are talking about Kerberos key available, it's not yet available and it's displayed as false. So what we are going to do is we'll tell the clients to log in into a URL which will be IPA/migration. It will ask them for the credentials rcval LDAP1 and the password. This is the same password that they used to log in using the directory server 389ds on infra server. I just click on migrate, and now if I have a look into user show command, it will display me that the Kerberos key is now available for user rcval LDAP1. Okay, the same happens for different users. And finally what you are going to do is, okay, let me log out. And let me migrate one more user. So in the same way, all the users will migrate themselves. They'll migrate themselves and they'll get their keys available. Now after we are done with it, I'll set the migration, enable migration to false, and here you can see it's now set to false, and now you are done with everything. Users have been migrated. Now server end is completely fine and it has all the new users. I am logging as an admin user, and I'll be able to see the users and the groups inside it. Users, here you can see these are the new entries that were fetched from 389ds on infra server, and here are the groups: RCval, LDAP 1, 2 and 3. Fine. Now coming on to the client machine, tell it not to authenticate against LDAP server. Forget about LDAP. Now get in password. Here you cannot see any user like LDAP. Second part is tell the client to authenticate against IPA server. How do we say? First thing we need to do is you need to install IPA server. Click on yes. I think I used IPA server. Sorry, it should be client. Sorry, it should be client actually. Yum install IPA client. So to every client we are going to install IPA client. Click on yes. Okay. Now the next step that we have to do at the client end is they should make use of the DNS which is corresponding to this IPA server. In case you have the client machines that are using DHCP to get the details, we can just update the DHCP server so that it provides the new DNS which is corresponding to the IPA to all these machines that are authenticating against IPA. So right now I am going to modify this file to make use of IPA server. So IPA client install --help, and one option which is good is enable DNS updates. It configures the machine to attempt DNS update when its IP changes, because if we are talking about an infrastructure in which we are using DHCP, client's IP address may change over the time. Second important thing is home directory should be created in case it's not present as soon as the user logins. So these are two important things. As soon as I say IPA client install --enable DNS mk homedir, it is able to discover the IPA server because it tries to fetch out the txt and service record corresponding to the Kerberos, and all looks fine. It's able to find the ream and the DNS IPA server and all details. Do you want to configure it? Click on yes. User authorized. Now you should have some administrator that has rights to register a client machine to IPA server. By default admin user has the rights, so provide it the username admin, passwords admin at 123. So here it says it's enrolled to the IPA ream labs.local. So it's now authenticating against the IPA server. Now if I try to get ent password grep rcval, it's not able to fetch. Okay, let's have a look into etc/ns/switch.conf. It says if I am trying to fetch the password database, it's first to be fetched from the files and then from the SSS database. Fine. If we are talking about SSS, the configuration is present in etc/ssd/ssd.conf. And here one important thing, it says Kerberos store password if offline. Very good feature which allows you to log in into a machine even in case the IPA server is not present. There is one option in ssd.conf which says enumerate, which can be set to true or false, by default which is false, which says if you are trying to fetch out the details of the users, whether they should be listed or not. So there is okay, so coming on to here, you can fetch the details of the user, so they cannot be enumerated. There should be something corresponding to enumerate users also. Okay, so enumerate is by default false, so that's the reason it doesn't displays you the list of all the users. Rather, in case you know, you can just type the username or the password to get the details. Second thing that we have to do right now is, let's try to log in into test VM using the user. So here I am able to log in into the test VM using the credentials of the same 389 directory server that I had. So that's how the users have been migrated. If I type the command klist, I can see that I have a Kerberos ticket granting ticket. Now I can make use of my single sign-on to access all the services that are authenticating against this Kerberos. If I try to log in into ipa.labs.local server, here I am able to log in into it without providing the password. The reason is because the policy of IPA server right now is allowing you or any user to log in into any machine in the IPA infrastructure. However, in case you want to restrict it, you can go to the policies and you can set host based access control. By default, it's allow all, which allows everyone to log in into every machine. So I would recommend modifying it so that at least it doesn't allow everyone to log in into here. If you come into it, you can specify whom it applies to, and secondly, via service, from which host, and accessing which host. So by default it allows any host. However, you should restrict the user's access to certain hosts. So that is how we have migrated the server as well as the client from 389 directory server to IPA server. Okay, I wanted to tell you one more thing. IPA stop. Now the IPA server or none of the services will be working on it. You are shutting down CS service, you will be shutting down Kerberos, you will be shutting down NTP, you will be and ultimately you will be setting down the LDAP service, and still you will be able to log in into test VM because of the offline credentials cache that is provided by SSS service. So I just come out of it. I come out of test VM, let it stop all the services. So finally it's stopping directory server and it has stopped all the service. Now if I try to log into test VM, so I am able to log in into this machine as rcval LDAP1, which is a user corresponding to LDAP server, IPA server, and the login was successful even in case IPA server is not available. What happens if I am trying to log in into a server using a different user rcval LDAP2? I am able to log in because the credentials are cached. So this IPA server allows user to access or log in into the machine even in case that is offline. So that was it. I hope I am able to make you understand how this migration works. I would be waiting for your comments and more suggestions so that we can make the videos better. Thanks for viewing the video. Have a good day.